My name is Tim Muckley, and I'm the Director of Corporate Real Estate for the Sherwin-Williams Company. With me today is Julie Young, who's our Vice President of Communications. We also have Bill Chilton, who is a principal of the architectural firm Picard Chilton. We've got Matt Heisey, who's a principal at the architectural firm of Vocon, and John Zegan with Osborne Engineering. What we're going to cover today, but what we're really focused on is presenting to you the how, the why, the where, and the what. My focus will be on the how and the why, then I'll turn it over to Matt and Bill to talk about the where and the what. I first want to start by just explaining a little bit of Sherwin's approach to this project. Sherwin wants this project to be successful. Sherwin needs this project to be successful. This is our future. This project means a lot to our organization. We believe that the key to that success is developing a strong partnership with the city. We know that a strong partnership, the foundation for a strong partnership, like any relationship, is developing trust. We know that trust is not earned, or trust is earned, it's not given. And in order to earn trust, we need to exhibit three qualities. And those qualities are being dependable, being credible, and showing integrity. So what does that mean in this context? Dependability is easy. Will I do what I say that I'm going to do? Can you rely on me to keep my promises? Credibility. Do I know what the heck I'm doing? Or have I at least surrounded myself with good people who know what they're doing? I'll be honest, this is the first 36-story high-rise building that I've ever built. But it's not the first for Matt and Bill and other people who are on our team. And then lastly, integrity. Will I do the right thing? Are my actions motivated by our own self-interest or for the betterment of the common goals of the partnership? But it's from this framework that, in mindset, that we look and approach this project. Build trust, develop a strong partnership, and make this incredibly successful for Sherwin and the city of Cleveland. With that said, we know that there's going to be times where the city's vision for urban development and Sherwin's business needs may not get aligned. When that happens, I can commit to do three things. First, be honest about what we can do. Third, second, our resources to try to find an acceptable resolution. Third, we've got an incredibly talented team, acceptable resolutions. We've got an incredibly talented team. So in a nutshell, that kind of describes the solution out there. They're going to find it. I want to give you a little bit of history and on the project background to try to explain the why. I want to give you a little bit of history and on the project background to try to explain the why. Since 1930 when it was constructed. Sherwin has been in the landmark office tower since 1930. We started out as a small tenant. Today we own the building and we occupy over 1 million square feet. We started out as a small tenent. We've experienced in the last 10 to 15 years we occupy over 1 million square foot. Which has been good for We've experienced in the last 10 to 15 years to find a place for all those people to sit, which has been good for everybody, except for the person who has to find a place for all those people to sit.
Could you speak just a little more into the microphone? I'm getting word that it's not picking up as well.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt. Could you speak just a little more into the microphone? I'm getting word that it's not picking up as well.
So we've had to expand our operations to Skyline Office Tower. We've had to expand our operations to a back office building, office tower. Back office. We've had to move some to operations to a back office building. We've actually had to move some of our headquarters people to Warrensville Industrial Parkway Center. We've actually had to move some of our headquarters people today. We've outgrown our R&D center just because we're. We also have some significant efficiencies. Today we've outgrown our building. We've got antiquated mechanical systems. We also have some significant deficiencies in our challenging floor plates. We've got low mechanical systems. We've got elevators that challenge have a mind of their own. We've got low ceilings. We've got elevators that kind of have a mind of their own sometimes. You know, we've always prided ourselves on being a company that is innovative. You know, we've always prided ourselves on being a company that is innovative. Our current building does not support a work environment that's consistent with those principles. So based on the need for more space, a work environment that's consistent with those principles. Modern work environment. So based on the need for more space, we started a nationwide search modern work environment to try to find a new home. In 2019, we started a nationwide search. We considered other options to try to find a new home. We considered other states' headquarters. But ultimately, we chose Cleveland. We considered other options. We considered other states in Cleveland. But ultimately, we chose downtown. And we just didn't choose anywhere in Cleveland. We chose Public Square. the epicenter of
We
the
just
city.
didn't choose anywhere in downtown.
While
We
other
chose
companies were
public
leaving the
square,
CBD,
the epicenter of the city.
and fleeing to the suburbs,
We
while
did
other
just
companies
the
were
opposite.
leaving the
We
CBD,
took our flag
and put it right in the middle of the city. Why? Because we wanted to show our commitment to the city where it all started for Sherwin-Williams in 1866 along the bank of the Cuyahoga River. We wanted to show our belief in the people of Northeast Ohio. If it wasn't for the city's support and the talented people of this area for the last 155 years, we wouldn't be the Fortune 200 company that we are today. Now we've assembled a team of world-class builders and designers. We're ready to get started. We're ready to fill in the missing puzzle piece that's eluded downtown for so long. And we're ready to do something transformational. Transformational for our employees, for our organization, and for the city of Cleveland. So before I turn it over to Matt and Bill, I did want to give a little bit of context behind our design. And start by, when we started this project, our first thing we did is we created a mission statement and had strategic filters. And I kind of wanted to talk about how those, take a few of those and explain how those translated into design elements. The first one was we wanted to create a world-class workplace that ignites innovation and productivity. We believe that the key to innovation and productivity is getting our employees to connect and collaborate. So one of the design elements that we did is we put everything in one high-rise tower. Instead of spreading it out over, we've got 7 acres, and instead of spreading it out as a campus. We've really wanting to make people just one elevator ride away from each other. Today, in Landmark, which is actually made up of 3 separate buildings that are all kind of pulled together, we've got 3 separate sets of high-rise elevators, 3 sets of low-rise elevators. We've got floors that don't connect. Getting our people to connect and collaborate in our current environment is very difficult. We've also reserved an area, you'll see over here, for expansion, for creating a future tower. Today we've got people, as I mentioned, we got people spread out all over. We want to make sure that we can continue to stay in this location, and we anticipate this is going to be our home for the next 155 years. Number 2, we want to attract and retain the best talent. Sherwin-Williams is a global company. We're in over 130 different countries. We need to be able to attract a talent globally. But we also want to retain the local talent that's already here. We want to stop the Northeast Ohio brain drain, and we want to keep those people here. We've got great universities, we've got talented people in Northeast Ohio, and we got to figure out how to keep them here. So how do we do that? We create a great workplace experience. Provide a place that is secure and convenient. We provide a place that has great amenities, both in the building and around the building. So you'll see from as we walk through the design, we've pulled our parking garage off of West 6th and off of Sinclair. And the idea behind that is we want to create, we're going to have great amenities in our building. We're going to have a fitness center. We're going to have a wellness center. We're going to have a cafeteria, a barista. However, though, we also want to have great amenities around our building. So our thought would be is that we'll eventually have future development that would maybe be very similar to what's on the other side of the street. Place where you could have retail, you could have restaurants, you could have a boutique hotel. It would be a place where our employees could shop at noontime or grab a beer after work with a colleague. So the other thing that we've looked at is also wanting to provide on-site, affordable, secure parking. It's really still one of the biggest complaints that we hear from our interview candidates is really the cost and the convenience of parking. We currently have 250 spots in our at Landmark, and there's a 10-year wait list to get into that garage. Third, we want to celebrate our brand. When you go by our building today, you don't even hardly know that Sherwin-Williams headquarters is there. That's not what's going to be happening in the future. We want our building to be a beacon of success, both for Sherwin-Williams and the city of Cleveland. We also want this project to be catalytic, and I think that you're already starting to see that. You've got the proposed renovation of 55 Public Square. You've got the demolition and the redevelopment of the Rockefeller Garage, and you've got the proposed Magellan development just north of our site. You hear the saying that the rising tide lifts all ships. You know, the further the success of Cleveland, it just furthers the success of Sherwin-Williams. And then lastly, we want to engage people and drive culture. We believe that you can't develop culture working remotely. Our CEO, John Reek, has probably said it the best. You can survive but not thrive with a remote workforce. So we're looking at this, and we're not going to reduce our footprint. We're still going to provide one-for-one seating for our employees. While other companies are finding ways to push people out of their headquarters, we're finding ways to bring them here. We're going to develop an R&D center at our headquarters that will bring people from all around the world. We have 60,000 employees globally. We train thousands of those every year. 90% of them are not headquarters employees. We're currently doing that training in hotel conference rooms, across the country. With this new L&D center, we're going to be bringing them right here to Cleveland. And really the reason is why is because we want them to learn our history and experience our culture. From a design perspective, what we've done is we've created a building that we call the Pavilion, and we've pulled some of the program elements out of the pavilion, or out of the tower, and we put them in the pavilion. And those two elements are our Center of Excellence, which tells the history of Sherwin-Williams, and our Learning and Development Center. We would consider that the cultural hub of our organization. So what better way to engage people and drive culture than to take your cultural hub, have it speak right to Public Square, and engage the community. You also see that we've connected the tower and the pavilion with a sky bridge. I understand that sky bridges are not favored, and that I also understand that the urban planning principles of maintaining the pedestrian streetscape. However, this is critical to our organization. It's critical that those two buildings function as one organism. It's critical that our primary workplace is connected to our cultural hub. And it's important that our visiting employees can easily interact and collaborate with our leadership. So that is to give a little bit of context behind how we came up with some of our designs. At this point, I'll turn it over to Matt and Bill. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Just quickly to recap and go through some of the metrics. Tim started to touch on it a few seconds ago. The project is broken down into three components. The Pavilion, which is effectively the front door of the organization, is approximately 50,000 square feet, 2 stories in height, and the programmatic functions that are in it, as Tim mentioned, will be the Learning and Development Center, will be the main proper entry to the building. There will be a barista. The Center of Excellence is the corporate lineage and the history of the organization, and there will be a merchandise store. The headquarters component is a 36-story tower. It will accommodate approximately 3,000 employees at just over 1 million square feet. And then lastly, the parking garage is approximately 920 spaces. It's important to note that Sherwin-Williams made a conscious decision to not develop parking for all 3,000 of their employees. So about 1/3 of their workforce will be able to be accommodated in the garage, but that was done because we know employees come from different places. Employees live downtown, employees use mass transit, and the 920 car parking garage will handle that. Also, there will be street-level retail on the liner facing West 3rd Street. That square footage is approximately 2,500 square feet.
Good morning. Good morning. Just to recap here, relative to the path going forward, we will be coming back with schematic design on August 31st and making that submission for September 14th review, and then the final submission will be on November 16th. with a review on November 30th. We did a project in Oklahoma City a number of years ago, and it's interesting the parallels between that project and this project, not just for the company, but for the city. In 2007, Oklahoma City was in the middle of a major renaissance, a big change from where they were in the 1990s and where they were going up until today. And what's interesting in that journey is the amount of impact that it had on the city. And the impact that it had is something that was let me just go back here. The impact that it had was significant because it transformed the city. It was the catalyst for growth in downtown Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City went from having some real challenges in the 1990s to last year being one of 50 destinations in Travel Leisure magazine. So how did that happen? Why did that happen? So what I'd like to do is just go through quickly 3 projects that we've worked on in the last 10, 12 years. Devon Energy, the project I was just referring to, again in downtown Oklahoma City. And while we can talk about the architecture, to the city, one of the amazing things that happened was the amount of economic impact and development that happened as a result of the project. Downtown Oklahoma City, 2012, here in these yellow dots here, you can see those are projects that followed on Devon Energy's commitment to downtown Oklahoma City. Devon had an opportunity to go anywhere in the country. In fact, they looked at Houston, but they decided to stay in the city where they were founded. And by doing that, not only was the investment relative to private development, but in downtown development, the redevelopment of 8 miles of streets in downtown, in the downtown area. Milwaukee, Northwestern Mutual made a commitment to expand their campus in downtown Milwaukee. It's the same story in terms of literally billions of dollars of investment that have happened just in the last 4 years. And then finally, Dominion Energy, a project we finished about 1.5 years ago. Again, taking a site that was needed redevelopment. Dominion said, you know what, we're staying not only in Richmond, we're staying in downtown. And again, just in the last few years, this amount of development. So how does that happen? Well, I'll tell you where it starts. It starts with leadership. And it starts with leadership between the public sector and the private sector. In each of these projects, and Sherwin-Williams is no different, there's a vision by the CEO about not only planting a firm flag in the downtown, but working in partnership with the public sector to make these projects happen. But there are other reasons as well. There is a commitment to the city. There is an engagement with the city. There are conversations like we're having right now that have a tremendous impact on ultimately what gets developed over time. This project represents an amazing opportunity, not just for Sherwin-Williams, but for the city of Cleveland. So to give you a little bit of context relative to the site, Matt's just going to walk you through the site, its relationship to the city, and some major components.
I'll go quick here.
Aerial view from the southeast orients the 3 project sites that, for purposes of this presentation, we're still referring to as the Jacob site and the Weston site, Weston North, Weston South. Its orientation on Public Square, the surrounding buildings around it, Key Tower, Terminal Tower, 200 Public Square. A shot from the southeast again, the orientation of the Jacob site, which again will be the front door and the pavilion. The Weston sites to the north as we bridge into the warehouse district. a shot from the warehouse district looking back on the site as well. From an existing conditions perspective, from site parking curb cuts, there are approximately just under 1,000 spaces on the site right now, approximately 11 curb cuts, and those 1,000 spaces span the Jacob site and the two Weston sites, Weston North, Weston South. Contextual photos around the site, you can see obviously images of the Renaissance, 55 Public Square, St. Clair, West 6th Street, and Frankfurt. From a zoning perspective, the site sits in two different use districts. The Jacob site is what is in the downtown design review and city planning district. The Weston sites are in the landmarks districts. From a zoning perspective, we think that we know that we're approved on height, we're approved on use. The only zoning variance that we think we have, and right now I'll say think, we're not far enough down the path, is in the Urban Core Overlay District on the Weston sites. The Urban Core Overlay District requires buildings to be built within 3 feet of the property line. With the tower and the caissons, the size of the 8-foot caissons that need to go into the ground, we're working through the logistics and all of the utilities that are in West 3rd Street to determine if we can push that building face up to the property line. If we were unable to do that, the sidewalk would be streetscaped as if it were a sidewalk. I don't know that anybody would know that we weren't exactly on the property line, but technically we may not be within 3 feet of that. When we come back in August, we will have clarification to that and we'll know whether we need that variance or not. Parking and transit, this slide shows all of the existing parking lots in downtown, where Sherwin-Williams employees currently park, where they come from, where mass transit bus stops are. Essentially, we have folks that are coming to this building from all sides. Employees come from the west, employees come from the east, from the north and down 3rd Street. We have employees that come from the south and the east, as well as the residents that live downtown. So essentially, employees and visitors are approaching this site from all sides.
So, you know the site well, and if you look at the site in terms of the 3 contiguous blocks, it's pretty unique. It's pretty unique in any city in the United States. The fact that this site is fronting Public Square, I would argue it's the most important site in Cleveland. I would say it's one of the most important urban sites in the United States. Public Square, originally 1796, was 4 quadrants, and it was the center of the city. And then in 1903, with the mall and the vision for the mall, sort of the shift of the center of the city went a bit towards the mall. But with the construction of Terminal Tower and Higbee's building in the 1930s, that shift came back to Public Square. And where we're sitting today is we're sitting in this very unique relationship, not only between the project and Public Square, but if we look at it in terms of the city, there's an interesting scene, is a word that I use to sort of describe what is happening at 3rd Street, because this is where there's a shift in scale from downtown, these major towers, and then the shift to scale to the warehouse district. And this is a really, really important shift. And as we debated the location of the various components to the project, meaning the tower, the pavilion, the parking garage, and we looked at a range of options, the decision was made to locate the pavilion here on the Jacob site. There are some very practical reasons. The floor plate that Sherwin-Williams needs to be able to function most efficiently would be really too big on that site. But there are also very important reasons relative to how Sherwin-Williams views this site relative to Public Square. You know, you could say that this is the front door for Sherwin-Williams, the pavilion itself, but the pavilion really can act as the front porch to public square and the power of that relationship. There's another reason that in terms of locating the tower on the western site, let me just pick this up here. If we located it, if we could, from a practical standpoint, locate on the Jacob site, you can start to see the I would say in particular sort of the tension between 50 Public Square and Terminal Tower. And by pulling it back like we have, it gives that relief. And importantly, we looked at views from around the city of the downtown skyline, and arguably Terminal Tower is the most significant tower in downtown Cleveland. And what happens is, in terms of the views, it starts actually, if the tower is located on the Jacob site, to compromise some of those views of Terminal Tower. So this allows Terminal Tower to breathe, if you will, visually. So we feel very, very good about that. There are two major site forces, I would say, that we are responding to in the design. One is obviously the relationship to Public Square, but also the relationship to the warehouse district. And again, as I was saying earlier, that change in scale. The concept design here it's already been pointed out in terms of the various components. But let me just touch on the future expansion piece of this, because it's important. What's located here west on what we call the southwestern site is future expansion for Sherwin-Williams. Timing of that, unknown, but it's important to be able to have that area for growth. And then with the parking garage located on the northwestern site, there is planned future development on the north and on the west. This could be commercial and retail, this could be residential or retail to the north. The first phase is, until that future expansion happens and this future development, would be surface parking, landscaped parking lots. And this would function, particularly on the southwestern side, as primarily a visitor lot for Sherwin-Williams. Here you can see the relationship of sort of the ingress and egress from the parking garages. And here, this is a one-way flow on Frankfurt into the garage entry with all cars exiting on 3rd. As we go through and look at the overall massing in this axonometric, this is showing the future development in terms of the future office tower and the development to the north and west of the parking garage. Again, this would be the first phase. This is what would be under construction by the end of this year. The organization of the pavilion and the tower is, and we'll get into a little more detail of this in a minute, but this functions, the pavilion itself and the tower really function as sort of one organism, if you will. We understand the concern with regard to sky bridges, and we do have two. We have one across 3rd and one here across Frankfurt connecting the parking garage to the tower. Now, why do we need that sky bridge on 3rd? Well, as I said, this is, in some ways, this is a vertical campus, given the fact it's an urban site. But that sky bridge functions, I would say, first and foremost, as a way of connecting the Sherwin-Williams family together. If Sherwin-Williams had made the decision to put everything on one site, so all the functions, learning and development, and the Center of Excellence at the base of the tower, you would have that same sort of functioning within the tower. What's happening here is we're pulling the Learning and Development Center of Excellence out on the Jacob site, and we have more of a horizontal flow than a vertical flow. There's also a couple of very practical reasons for the sky bridge. The first is This is quite food service intensive on the Jacob site, and kitchens and dining are in the tower. And so just to be able to service that. Secondly, utilities going from the tower to the pavilion are actually within that sky bridge. But I'll come back to this is really functioning for Sherwin-Williams to be able to have a highly functioning facility. It's also important to note that the sky bridge is private. It's not something that would be publicly accessible. So in terms of it's really functioning in terms of people working within the building itself would be using the sky bridge. Relative to building heights within the city, we're at about 616 feet tall, and that would make it the fourth tallest building in Cleveland. I'd just like to touch on quickly some, as we are in schematic design right now. So what are some of the things that we're concerned about? And I just wanted to highlight 3 projects to talk about not only the relationship in the city, but what is happening at the ground plane. For instance, how do we integrate art within the overall project? This is a project in Chicago, River Point. Again, there's the same sort of issues in terms of what we're concerned about relative to the ground plane, art, presence in the city is relevant to that project. And then finally, also in Chicago, 300 North LaSalle, in both cases, projects which touch the river, and how do we engage the environment around us. So what we wanted to do today is to give you a sense of where things are going from a schematic design standpoint. We appreciate this is for conceptual review and approval, but we thought it would be good to give you a real-time view as to where we're at. In fact, what I'll be reviewing with you, portions of this were just reviewed with Sherwin-Williams last Thursday. So let me just sort of, put these pieces in place. So here we have, this is the parking garage here and the future development. This is the pavilion. And what you see here is a sky bridge connection. And I'll talk in a minute here about why the pavilion is shaped and organized the way it is. This is the future expansion for Sherwin-Williams, which would be on the west end of the site. Actually, let me pull this. And this represents the concept design. Oops. Represents the concept design for the tower. So let me walk through with you what has shaped what you're seeing there in the model. Views from the tower. This site is, I would say, particularly blessed with fabulous views in every direction. Whether it's to Lake Erie, whether it's to Public Square, to the warehouse district, to the flats, there's literally no bad view from the tower. And if you look at the relationship of the tower to the city, here is looking from the Memorial Shoreway, and you get a sense of what the presence is of the tower. And also, I mean, this is just one particular view, but again, sort of the deference that's being shown to Terminal Tower and to Key Tower. When we start looking at the overall building massing, I'll just use Key Tower here. We think about towers in terms of, and when I say we, I'd say architects. This has been around for a very long time. But a base and a middle and the top. If you look at the top of the tower here, it's a landmark. It's an architectural lighting opportunity. In the middle here, which is sort of the guts of the tower itself, it's articulated to avoid a monolithic appearance. It's slender vertical proportions, and historically, oftentimes they were stepped back to increase light, thank you, and air at street level, and then the base. In the interest of time, we've got about 5 minutes So I'll go through the rest of this quickly. Relative to the tower, the aspect ratio, or the relationship of height to width. If you look at Key Tower, it's a little under 7:1. Terminal Tower is 7:1. We have a much larger floor plate that we're working with here. And so how do we start to shape and sculpt the tower to, in this case, sort of break down the relationship to have a more sort of visually slender tower? Let me just real quickly, relative to the lobbies, we have the pavilion lobby here and the tower lobby here. And again, there's a connection relative to the sky bridge, and then this is the parking lobby. And at the second level, you can see the sky bridge connection that brings all of this together. So I mentioned about aspect ratio. Right now, this block that you see here, that is 3:1. What we've done relative to the tower itself, is we've created this slot here, which breaks down the aspect ratio actually into two pieces. A portion of it is at 7:1, the other is at 5:1. So as we started to shape this tower, we looked at the aspect ratio, as I was just mentioning. We then started to say, what about if we started to, we're along that demarcation where that slot is, actually sort of pull the tower apart, particularly vertically, to accentuate that articulation. And then as we started to look at the crown, how do we shape this in such a way that it starts to have, I would say, more of a sort of a logic to it. So for instance, here, the tallest portion here is fronting Public Square. This is also, the view to the south. This sort of proportional relationship is what you would see. There's a datum that exists in Public Square, and you can see it. It's not a precise elevation, but there is this datum. Where there's a break in terms of the lower mass and the higher mass. We have a much different building here with large floor plates, but what we've done here is we started to sculpt this, creating these terraces, which are recognizing these fabulous views in all four directions, but also echoing that datum. And so this is how it comes together. So that's the terraces I was just talking about, obviously the pavilion, and then the tower top. Matt?
Yeah, we can be brief about just in the interest of time, the way that the internal functions work together. Bill mentioned, our main lobbies off of Public Square, the main connector, the connective tissue of the organization as one organism on the ground level, barista, main entry, merchandise store, center of excellence on the north half. Secondary lobby on the tower. And then on the second level, connecting through the line of security, connecting the pavilion to the tower across the pedestrian bridge. Food service, as Bill mentioned, will be on the second level of podium, allowing that function and the servability of food to the learning and development functions on the second level. The south portion of the second level of the pavilion is also learning and development as well. So essentially, the entire second level of the pavilion is learning and development. The first level of the pavilion is more open space, barista, center of excellence, the welcoming front door of the organization, all connected through the sky bridge as the one organism, as Bill has mentioned, back and forth to the tower above.
And then this is an image on the skyline. I'd just like to close with a quick comment, and that is, a number of years ago, there was an article written in the New York Times, and it was entitled "For Great Buildings, Get a Great Client." And the thrust of the article was how some very important ideas of landmark buildings were actually ideas of the client. And this project is no different. In that, if you look at the location, how the siting of the pavilion, the siting of the tower, being respectful of the context. These are all out of conversations that we've had with Sherwin-Williams. Of course, the most important decision that they made was to be in Cleveland, downtown, on Public Square. When we were working in the early stages of the project, CEO John Maricas made a comment about his vision for the project, and he said, "Bring to life who we are." And I think those are great words, certainly to speak about Sherwin-Williams and this project, but about the city of Cleveland as well. Thank you.
Thank you. For the edification of our listening audience, I'm going to lay out how we're going to deliberate, and we're going to move into deliberations at this time. We will be taking a short 10-minute recess to transition to our design review committees. Our design review committees will be deliberating with Sherwin-Williams for 60 minutes. We will then take another recess and have our commissions deliberate with Sherwin-Williams for 60 minutes. So we will have an opportunity for a very robust exchange. So at this time, we're going to go to a brief recess, and we will be returning shortly. Thank you. Testing. Thank you. We're going to now start the first deliberation in this meeting. And we are starting today with our Design Review Advisory Committees, chaired by Mr. Jack Bialowski. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bialowski, who's going to lead the meeting for the next 60 minutes. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming back. We're going to conduct this a little bit differently because it's a larger group where we usually have a free-flowing conversation. Because we have both committees together, we're going to be a little more formal. So if you raise your hand to be recognized, and Tom Sterinsky, my colleague, is going to give us the order in which people will be able to speak here and ask their questions. But first, just a couple of comments. First of all, thank you so much for that presentation this morning. It's really enlightening. Appreciated being able to see the look ahead, which explains a lot of the questions that I'm sure that people have. Over the course of the last period of time, from the public comments, the city's received in Sherwin-Williams, and I know that you are responding to them, over 40 written comments from the public, which is really quite remarkable. And they are, almost all of them, very serious and well considered. First of all, expressing gratitude to Sherwin-Williams for all that they've done for the community over the years and for wanting to keep their flag planted here downtown and at Public Square. So that decision is really fabulous. There's much recognition of a hometown favorite, and we are all rooting for its great success. So having said that, the largest concerns which were raised through these comments related to the tower location and the perceived completion of Public Square, the aversion to sky bridges, which was mentioned in almost half of all of the comments, a strong desire for street vitality and activity on the street as opposed to large swaths of blank walls at street level, whether for parking garages or office uses. This applies to the entire ground floor, but especially to Frankfurt. And concern over the implication of vacating Frankfurt, a recognition that it is one of the strongest connections from Public Square to the warehouse district. And if it is vacated, an easement or other form of guarantee is needed to ensure that this connection is preserved. These really were the main comments that came out of those comments, and I'm sure they echo many of the thoughts of both of these groups. Having said that, I'm going to open the...
So, point of order, Mr. Chair. Before we begin, we do need to take the roll call
of all
those
Anthony.
present for the
Please.
committees. So you may answer here or present when I call your name. Bialowski,
Present.
Benton, Bogart, Boyd, Brown, Geist, here. Long, O'Connell,
Here.
Parker,
Present.
Pizarczyk,
Present.
Schwartzberg, Soltis,
Here.
Vanderweel, Yablonsky, Zarfos,
Present.
and Zarnas. Mr. Chair, we do have a quorum, and just a note, Ms. Vanderweel and Ms. Schwartzberg did have to recuse themselves from being present today due to a conflict of interest.
Very good. Anthony, is there any other points of order that need to be mentioned before we open the discussion up?
Nope, we are good.
Very good. Okay. So,
Mr. Barlowski, the TV is hard to pick up the voice, so when you make sure your green light is on and make sure you speak into your microphone so everybody can hear.
thank you, Tom. So I'm going to open up the panel for questions. Well, I'll start with a few myself. How many employees, I think you said that there are 60,000 globally, and 90% of those are not here. Does that mean that there are, how many employees expected to be downtown?
Well,
Approximately 3,100.
3,100 employees, thank you. Okay. How tall is the lower pavilion anticipated to be? I know it's 2 stories, but what is its height, and how does that compare to the datum lines around Public Square, say, for example, for the Renaissance or other pieces? Yeah.
I want to say roughly, probably to the top, nominally 50 feet. The datum, relationship of the datum is, actually let me use this model, is relative to the terrace here. So when we talk about that relationship of the datum, this is what we're...
Okay, so the pavilion is significantly
Lower,
than...
that's right.
Okay. How big is the floor plate of the tower?
Floor plates of the tower are approximately 28,500 square feet at the moment.
28,500 square feet. Okay, and for those people who may not know, 25,000 is probably the smallest size tower block that would be an efficient office space. So it's not overly large, but it is certainly, in order to make a tower work and be efficient, it's right at that lower edge of what it would be able to be.
Said, I would say for the towers that we're involved with being, I would say, between 26 to 29,000 gross square feet is sort of in the sweet spot.
Very good. What is the first floor height of the parking garage? Yes. And the reason I'm asking is relative to the potential for there to be other uses on that first floor in that block, whether it's retail or something else, garage height would not be adequate for that.
Right, I think on the first floor, don't hold me to this, but I want to say it's around 11 feet.
I'm sorry?
Don't hold me to this, but I think it's around 11 feet.
11
on
feet.
First floor, floor to floor.
Okay, so not really high enough if we convince you to put other uses in the bottom of that garage. Are you anticipating a mid-block crossing at grade underneath the sky bridge? No. So as the public flows through that pavilion, or if it does, and I imagine there is a public function on the ground floor of that pavilion because there's a merchandise, am I correct, that the public is welcome in the ground floor of the pavilion? So, but they are not likely to be going into the tower as well unless they were conducting business, so there's no reason for that mid-block crossing at grade level.
The sky bridge is essentially on the secure side of security, so theoretically anybody that's crossing the sky bridge would be in the tower for business functions.
Okay.
Can I just clarify on I think you were asking if there's public access to the pavilion. And our intention is, we're looking at all the options. When we talk about the barista and the retail store, it is likely that it will be open to the public, but no final decision.
It's not determined yet.
That is not determined.
Okay. What happens to the landmark tower when you exit it?
Yeah, we've got plans, and we'll try to sell that, just with, same thing with our Marine Technical Center down on the river, same thing with Lawrenceville. And obviously, we're looking for, want to see it, quickly, redeveloped, and some of the things that make it not sometimes such a great office building would make it an excellent building for potentially, condominiums or apartments.
So potentially conversion to residential.
I think that would be very likely.
Very good. So have you done a traffic study? Does one exist? There is a lot of discussion about how Frankfurt will be perceived and used. And there's also a feeling, I think, certainly in conversations that have happened here, that the city really needs to be a partner with Sherwin-Williams in terms of working on issues around traffic flow. If you have 3,000 employees here and you have almost 1,000 cars which are going to be entering and exiting this block, it's really going to be important to understand those traffic impacts and issues around service on Frankfurt. So can you address that? How many trucks a day are coming? Why do you want to change the direction of flow? And talk to us about egress and ingress into the parking garage.
There's a lot of questions in there, so I'll try to take them kind of one at a time. So our vision for Frankfurt would be that, once it's vacated, we probably would block it off at the West 3rd Street side. And when I mean block it off to vehicular traffic. But obviously, we're going to keep that. I mean, we acknowledge and realize that, that is one of the primary connectors from Public Square to the warehouse district. So that would stay open for pedestrian traffic. But what our idea is that we would, not have through traffic. Is kind of is what our thinking is at this point. And we also know that, a large percentage of our employees are coming from the north. I'm sorry, from the south. And we'll funnel through a lot of the way they do today, coming up Ontario Street, and that group will be coming through here, and we envision them coming down West 6th, turning on to vacated Frankfurt, and then our busiest time is in the morning, and so the thought would be is that if there's any stacking that occurs, it occurs on Frankfurt, and we make sure we keep all the vehicular traffic off the road. Same thing with deliveries. Deliveries would come in back into the loading dock, and then be able to exit back out onto.
How often? How many deliveries a day are you receiving?
I don't know. We receive most of them in the morning. Today they unload off of Huron. I could probably get that for you. I don't know.
I think that we do need to know that, and I appreciate that you understand where your employees are coming from and when they're coming. I don't know if they're all released at the same time onto the city streets, but I think it's really important that a traffic engineer study this and in conjunction with the city come back with a report that says that these streets are not going to be in failure based on the plan that you have. And I don't know whether have you started to do that yet? Do you have a traffic engineer engaged?
Yes. So we just recently engaged Nelson Nygaard, which will be be our traffic consultant. Some of the reason why we didn't do one earlier is with COVID, there was just if we would have done one, we don't think the data would have been accurate. I think now that people are coming back, I think traffic patterns are probably getting back closer to normal. So
that's a very understandable reason. I appreciate that very much.
So we acknowledge that that's something that we need to do. I think I addressed all of them.
Most of them, but let's just keep going for a minute because I think.
One point of clarification on the traffic study. Some conversations we've had internally with Director Collier and Mr. Barlowski is that the traffic study really shouldn't always be a burden of just Sherwin-Williams, because there's a lot of things happening here, and there's a lot of wants and needs in the district. So I believe it's a partnership and a collaboration of the city, the warehouse district, Downtown Cleveland Alliance, Greater Cleveland Partnership, NOACA, and RTA in the same conversation to make sure your needs are met, but also everything else. So I think I just want to be incumbent. And if you don't have anything else, Mr. Parker.
I'm not quite ready yet. Thank you, Mr. Sterinsky. Relative to the future expansion tower, we understand that parking needs are changing over time, ride sharing, automated vehicles, public transportation. But you're showing a fairly massive addition at some point. And the question is, do you have any idea when that might be projected? And also, how would you park it at such time? You know, how would you expand parking on site?
I think our intention would not be to do any further on-site expansion of our parking. So we roughly have 3,100 people. This garage will have 900 and some spaces. So I think that's adequate. I mean, today we've got 250 parking spaces in our building. So it's going to be a dramatic increase from what we have today. I wouldn't envision us adding to that parking garage. As far as the future tower, I really don't have a timeline on that. It was more just, we've made this mistake in manufacturing plants and DSCs that we have throughout the country of not planning for the future and not thinking about what our growth is going to be. I would have never guessed 10 years ago that we would be where we're at today. And I want to make sure that, one of my goals was to do smart master planning and making sure that this remains the site that Sherwin can stay for years to come.
Tim, I appreciate your answers. I don't agree that you won't need to provide additional parking at some point. And the reason that I'm asking that is that there has been discussion about the low density of the parking garage, that it has a very big floor plate. It's not very tall. And that if you were to add additional floors to it, that this would preserve land at the bottom, both for potential expansion of a garage, which is much easier to do horizontally than it is vertically, and also for other potential uses. There's been a lot of discussion about the lack of active uses on the street level, on Frankfurt, the de minimis portion of it that is actually on West 3rd. And so that's something that I think needs to be considered further. And I should say that I personally believe that the planning, the site planning that's going on, the place where these pieces are apportioned, I respect and agree with, that the land which has been left on the northwestern block is appropriate size that is going to make for successful development there. But can you also talk about that development, when you think that would happen, and whether Sherwin-Williams is prepared to partner with others if that's needed to make those developments viable?
Absolutely. And some of our thought is by keeping the parking garage at a lower level, that as you develop, the potential, retail, or even if it's residential units along Sinclair, that you really wouldn't even see the parking garage. I mean, that was kind of what our thought process was. We made sure this was appropriate sized, that we accommodate most of your typical retail bays or even potential hotel user. And the same thing along Sinclair. I think we dropped in some brownstones or something along there just to make sure that those are the things that actually would fit, and that they would be at a height where you really wouldn't see the parking garage at all, really, from West 6 or from Sinclair.
And do you have thoughts about, in the meantime, how you would treat those facades?
That's what we're working through. Now, we understand. I mean, nobody wants to look at just the side of a concrete garage. So we understand that. We're working through that with the design team to figure out what that exactly looks like, and how potentially maybe we even use that to celebrate our or color our products potentially. So we're working through that. And just to go back, I think one other thing, I have talked initially to a few developers, and it's just, the time right now is really difficult when you start talking retail and restaurants. I think in the next year, you're going to see that improve dramatically. And it is just as much our intent and our desire to want to have those amenity pieces that I talked about. We bought more land than what we needed, and we knew that. But we wanted to make sure we knew what was going around us and how that supported our people.
Right. Very good. Appreciate that answer. I'm going to recognize Director Collier now.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I wanted to say to Tim, thank you for the proposal for the tower, first and foremost, and also just getting a little glimpse of what your massing is. I want to say that the building looks to be dynamic and kind of moving in the right direction. But obviously, the tower is something that many people are excited about. But much of the conversation is really about the site itself and how it integrates into our downtown. And we know that this is a once-in-a-lifetime investment, so we want to make sure that we get this right. A couple things with respect to what was stated by Mr. Bialowski with respect to in the meantime. What people have to look at until those development happens matters. There's a couple of key examples here locally where that was done very well. University Hospitals is one of them, where they really were aggressive about the facades on the garage to make it attractive in order to create that sort of visual impact and hide the cars and do things of that nature. So there's a design solution for that, and I think we'd be willing to work closely with you to figure out what that interim situation is. With respect to the retail, we understand that obviously coming out of COVID-19, retail can be very challenging. However, we want to make sure that as we move forward in the future, that we have opportunities to be additive to the site, which I think that you've allowed space to do. One question that I do have is with respect to the employees who are working downtown. Obviously, from a city perspective, we want them living downtown and also spending money downtown. So with respect to those uses, I know that it was conceived to be a possibility of townhouses on the St. Clair side. But what about that West 6th side? I know there was some discussion around mixed-use possibilities, and I'm also wondering what smaller scale organizations or businesses are spinoffs or benefit from the products of Sherwin-Williams, companies that could potentially locate close by in a mixed-use scenario. So this is an organization that's obviously global, and its tentacles reach out globally, but they also have to reach out locally. So talk to me a little bit about the thinking about the mixed-use development and what flanks this site.
No, thank you. We kind of envision that the West 6th side would look very similar to potentially what's across the street right now, where you've got restaurants, you've got some apartments and offices potentially above them, kind of in that same height and that same characteristic. Again, we'll have to. We're not a developer. We'll need to work with a developer to find that solution. But I can assure you that we're going to be a very active participant in that process. And, you're right. We have a lot of businesses that we work with. And, it would be an opportunity for us to look at some of those businesses and say, hey, why don't you locate here?
Right there, right.
You're right next door. So that will be the process that we'll be going through, and I think it's a great opportunity both to have that infill and also to support Sherwin-Williams.
Thank you, Tim. Just one more question before we go to Rick, which is for Matt, and that is, I know you've talk to us about a tunnel across West 3rd rather than Sky Bridge.
So obviously we talked about the connectivity of the organism. We did look at multiple scenarios. We know that there have been comments. We considered the idea of tunneling under West 3rd Street. The fact of the matter is there are major utilities in West 3rd Street that essentially make tunneling under West 3rd Street not possible. The logistics that go with it, the street closures, and the amount of utilities that are in West 3rd Street made tunneling under West 3rd Street not the best. As we talked about the employee experience and the experience of those living within the tower, it changes the employee experience as well. It changes the visitor experience. You know, my front door is coming to the pavilion as a visitor, first-time visitor to Sherwin-Williams. I walk into an amazing glassy pavilion, I get greeted in the right way, I go through security, and now I'm sent down an elevator to go through a tunnel to come back up into the tower. The alternative, the decision that we've decided to go with is the sky bridge. You know, a glassy, open, transparent connection from the second floor of learning development across to a dynamic two-story space on the other side as well.
Thank you, Matt. Mr. Parker.
Thank you. Rick Parker with a Historic Downtown Design Review. I'd like to take Jack's lens and turn it just slightly and look at it a little differently. Some of the concerns about, we talked a lot about the traffic on Frankfurt and that. I've been a business owner and building owner in the warehouse district for nearly 40 years, over 40 years, so I'm very familiar with the district. Several of us have a very strong concern about the pedestrian experience, the community experience, the residents' experience, traversing from Public Square and west on Euclid Avenue and all those major thoroughfares. And you've acknowledged that Frankfurt is a significant connector into the district. Well, just responding to the information provided, you've acknowledged it verbally, but I don't see it in the design. You've got some retail liner on West 3rd. Nothing's proposed on Frankfurt, and I think that's what Jack was alluding to, the height of the garage structure. And also, and it's slightly outside the warehouse district, but the Pavilion Site, creating a wall, in this concept of creating a wall there that kind of barricades Frankfurt access from Public Square. So realizing that you don't need that whole site for the square footage for the program there, we've talked about, how can that connection on that particular site be more inviting and draw people to Frankfurt to get into the warehouse district. I don't know, I guess I'd like to hear your conversations on what conversations you've had with that respect specifically. You've acknowledged it, and there are certainly different ways to get into the warehouse district, but I mean, just logic and nature, and you just stand there and look at it, that's the connection. So what I'm hearing is a lot of justification, and you can work through the traffic, and we deal with that on Johnson Court. I mean, we've got a similar situation, and there are other issues down there, but I guess I'd like to hear more about your thought process or in that regard. The reality of people traversing up West 3rd North, going past a limited retail, which probably will fail because there's nothing around it. And then you've got a garage, an ugly garage across the street, and some other stuff going on that really doesn't lend itself to the pedestrian experience. So if you can talk about that, the traffic we've addressed, some of the logistics and all that kind of stuff, good design and thinking will get through that. But I'm really concerned about the experience of the pedestrian and the people that live in the district and work in the district.
I'm a lot softer, so. Thank you for your question. Regarding the traffic, one thing I think worth pointing out, and again, we're at a conceptual level. This is a perfect time, as Mr. Starinsky mentioned, to get the public involved in the traffic conversation and the connectivity. But one thing that we see generally in downtown, especially recently with the plan that I know the city's involved with to add pedestrian connectivity to the lakefront, which is, for a long-time Cleveland resident, something I thought I'd never see. The Frankfurt specifically, and one of the reasons we talked about blocking the end of the road and changing the traffic pattern there was because we see that as a pedestrian connection to the warehouse district. If you look at this, and I don't mean to speak for the architects, but if you look at this, we're also repairing the edge of the warehouse district at this parking lot. When we look from the warehouse district to downtown. There was something missing from the warehouse district perspective too. So by cutting off the auto traffic or reducing the auto traffic through Frankfurt, the thought process that we're beginning on as we start our traffic study is this is a pedestrian-oriented connection. And so, again, we're still starting the traffic study and really getting into the meat of it now, but the auto connection is there through the other corridors towards into and out of the warehouse district, but we really thought that the warehouse district deserved a pedestrian connection to the downtown area and public square.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about the Pavilion Site then? My question on that.
The Pavilion Site, again, I thought it was well presented by the architects here. The idea was to get down below that datum line and connect to public square, and by bring the project to public square and keeping the pathway through Frankfurt, we hope to strengthen that pedestrian connection between the two districts, because they've always been separate, both architecturally and from a traffic perspective to a certain degree. I don't know if that answers your question.
The programming maybe that happens on the first floor. That may start to answer the question that's being asked. From a pedestrian experience, the programming that happens on the first floor of, let's talk about West 3rd Street to start, to address your initial question. As you come off of the corner of Superior and 3rd and you head north as a pedestrian, say you're coming from Public Square, you kind of meander through, the front door. The intention is working with we just onboarded our landscape architect, that the outside portion of the entry of the building is very dynamic. It's, what we've referred to as potentially the color garden. Something that changes seasonally, that showcases color, showcases brand, and essentially invites pedestrians from Public Square to this corner of the building. Walking then from West Roadway westbound and Superior to the corner of West 3rd and Superior, I now, as a pedestrian, turn north. And on the tower side, the main tower lobby is intended to transcend the entire expanse from Superior to Frankfurt. That's a 24-foot high, potentially glassy lobby, activity inside, people moving around. So that is a dynamic first floor experience from the outside. I continue up 3rd Street, I now encounter the parking garage, and this is where we have our retail liner. We're working on uses that might go into the retail liner. We're talking about uses that could use that retail liner based on the square footage that it is right now. And from that point, I am now into the warehouse district. On the Pavilion side, what has not been said is, the first story programming consists of main lobby, barista merchandise store on the south half of this two-story connector, and then the Center of Excellence on the north side. So essentially, as I'm walking down that same route, I get glimpses into the inside of the building. I see the barista, I see the merchandise store. If I choose to go north onto Frankfurt, I am coming past glassy looks into potentially the Center of Excellence. And so there's an engaging...
I think maybe give a little color to the Center of Excellence.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the Center of Excellence is a program component that exists at Sherwin-Williams today. It is essentially where visitors come today. If you are a visitor to the organization, you basically, pre-COVID, went to the Center of Excellence. It's a space where you're greeted. It's a space where you can understand the history of the organization. There's quotes from Henry Sherwin. There's initial patents. There's the brand displays. It's essentially the front branded entry to the front door. When you walk in now today, you walk in the building and you don't get that. You walk to get to the Center of Excellence. You go up through Van Swiergen Arcade and you arrive there. The vision for the Center of Excellence here is you walk in the front door and you know immediately what this organization does. We celebrate color, we celebrate brand, we celebrate design. And so the Center of Excellence is that place that the outward story can be told. It's also a place where customers are invited in to learn about the organization as well. So in the initial planning...
One other comment, excuse me, is, this is all in development, but from the exterior, that if you're in Public Square or you're walking along here, you get a sense of who is Sherwin-Williams. I mean, that's a real opportunity to be able to see into this center of excellence. So relative to Mr. Parker, your question about activity, certainly during, the daytime, this is going to be, along with, this southern portion, I would say, much more active.
But you imagine it nighttime as well.
Exactly.
So, I'd like to follow up, please. So, you've addressed architecturally. I understand. I'm an architect. I understand all that. And certainly, if Sherwin-Williams wants to put the best face forward, I appreciate that and support that completely. But I'm still looking at, I'm coming from Public Square, I'm hitting a wall there, and I have to make a decision for a 90-degree turn north to go down Frankfurt, or a 90-degree turn south, go down Superior, and then turn again 90 degrees to come back into the district. I'm not hearing anything that addresses how if the thought is at all to draw people. Okay, so unless the building's open 24/7, which I know it's not going to be, and I can use that building as a hallway to get through to Frankfurt, I don't see it. I still don't see it. All right, so I see a narrow Frankfurt on Public Square right there. I don't see anything that invites you to come around that, other than, obviously all the great stuff for Sherwin-Williams. And I'm not knocking any of that. That's absolutely valid. But I'm looking at that experience for the people that live in here that come back and forth through Public Square to Euclid and all the other areas of downtown.
Thank you, Rick. I'm going to recognize Mr. Sterinsky for a moment, then Mr. Collier, then Alan O'Connell, and then Mr. Yablonsky.
So just to, I think, clarify a little bit what Mr. Parker is saying, thinking, reinforcing the pedestrian aspect that you want to create on both Frankfurts all the way to 6th Street. Is there some siting that we could, that you could consider in terms of maybe moving the pavilion south a little bit to make that space between 55 Public Square and the pavilion more of a people place that pulls people all the way across? And then could we think about adjusting the footprint of the parking garage? And maybe you grow a couple stories, but then you create the opportunity to create liner buildings on Frankfurt where there's likely going to be people, because there's never going to be, for the foreseeable future, a two-sided street on that block of West 3rd Street. So to the point of Rick saying that retail won't survive there, there's not a reason to put retail there. So again, in the idea of this shouldn't all be incumbent on Sherwin-Williams, there's a collaboration opportunity to think about a retail strategy of all the buildings, including the ones that you're building currently, and think about where to put retail and adjust the footprint of the parking garage to accommodate that.
Tom, remember there are going to be 3,000 people planted on this block, coming out onto the streets here. So that is an argument for retail actually succeeding both on West 3rd and on Frankfurt. And at a minimum, raising the floor height of the garage, first floor, to 19, 20 feet would allow you to be flexible as to how much you had, but you could increase it. Okay,
at the minimum, we're shrinking the footprint to get liner buildings to have that face of Frankfurt be a more human scale. Was where I was going.
Thank you, Director Collier.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of key things. Given the fact that you're going to have thousands of employees on a given site, I'm really looking at sort of the travel habits of your employee base, because that's really what's going to dictate, what happens on the street, et cetera. Obviously, there's a bend toward the automobile, because I'm sure many of your employees, travel here by car. The question is, how do we change that? And my question is, have you guys had any conversations with RTA about transit waiting environments on the site, at the perimeter of the site? One, what that experience is. And given the fact that you're right next to Tower City Center, which is a transit hub that can get you to many different locations in the greater Cleveland area via rapid transit, or those who are coming from inside the city, by bus. So that RTA conversation and really trying to get people out of their vehicles, utilizing public transportation, what type of site conditions are you creating or thinking about creating to enhance that opportunity for your employees?
Yeah, let me speak to that because we just had a conversation with RTA yesterday, and we talked a little bit about, you know, from the work that we've been able to do as far as like looking at our Wage Works program, it appears that about 1/3 of our people do take some form of public transportation. I think now, again, that things have advanced past the pandemic, you know, we're going to take the opportunity to send out surveys to our employees to try to get a better idea of like, are they taking car? Are they taking, you know, the Rapid? Are they using buses? But from what we can tell, it looks like about 1/3 of them are currently taking public transportation today.
Sure. And we would like for your organization, and you know, given Sherwin-Williams being a mainstay in the city, is to be partners in helping to change travel habits. You know, a lot of what is happening right now in the city, you know, with different organizations, is really incentivizing and promoting and encouraging their employee base to think differently about how they move around and how they get around. So we would like to be partners with you in really helping to support your employees in really making positive environmental impacts by changing the culture as to how they move about. That's really important, I think, for the city of Cleveland.
So as part of when we were like looking at our site selection process, we did a heat map of, we took every employee address and we plugged it in to a program where it tells you exactly, it puts a dot on a map and tells you exactly where they live at. Talked to Mr. Shipner yesterday, and you know, we're going to try to look at sharing that with RTA, so that way they can kind of say, okay, this is where most of Sherwin's employees are. You know, do we have bus routes to those locations? And maybe we can work together to try to make sure that if we have a lot of people in an area that's underserved, that we can, you know, try to work with them to get, you know, get buses to those locations.
Thank you, Tim. It seems that we need to keep moving, but clearly convening a meeting with RTA, the city, and others relative to those issues is an important thing to do. I'm going to recognize Mr. O'Connell.
Hello. So I think given your initial presentation, and what we all understand is we understand that the property that's located just adjacent to public squares is very important to the city. It's therefore, you know, I think we should give the most emphasis to having good design there, and we won't get another shot at it in our lifetimes to make sure that we do it right. So, you know, I think it's important to promote spatial order of significance in an orientation that concentrates intensity of building form and use around this focal point, which we agree to be the consensus center of our city. This is the heart of our city, and we should be recognizing the importance of that spatial order which already surrounds public square by accentuating the moment where the site meets public square. Do we all agree on that as design professionals? Okay, so if we all agree that public square is important, we won't get another shot, and that we should
it's all down to the lost we learned. For a long time, for all it's worth. I wanna know what it's you.
And I think they're now opening.
What about lost now? There's the demons coming. Stand up and you're freedom of soul.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I feel like my on your conversation. I'm Karen. I'm here. Nice to meet you.
Right. I work for the city. She's a council person.
You work for
Cleveland Heights.
Cleveland Heights. I'm a travel writer.
Okay.
And lover of Halloween.
Yeah.
So,
It's fun.
yes, I'm so excited to have a Halloween. It's
It's a lot of fun. Like I said, it's been a weird 12 or 15 months everywhere, but you know, from a city government, I think that's not development. It's been a really weird 12 or 15 months. You know, a lot of small businesses, you know, figuring out how to make it. But there's also a lot of, and it's really awesome that they were able to kind of move forward and you know, do all the work they need to do and get open. You know, given everything that's
I
going on.
know, it's so hard to get moving like that.
That too.
What other
So I guess they, you know, I'm on the other side of Cleveland Heights, and I don't know how familiar you are with this area.
I am not.
Okay. In Cleveland Heights, we're the suburb, intermediate suburb directly adjacent.
Yes.
So if you go on our other side, you get to see that area. So we've got a big $85 million mixed-use project going on over there. A couple other $15 to $20 million housing projects going on. So it's all really exciting. We had another one we're teeing up, you know, just for Cedar Lake.
Oh, Cedar Lake.
You know, just at the next meeting over. I recommend checking out Cedar Lake District as well. Okay, so if you go to the next major intersection, it's across from the high school. There's a really cool district there too. Kind of. We've kind of gotten a collection of kind of craft beverages. Okay. I've heard of these levels good. Okay.
Technically, I live out of my car traveling because right after this, we're headed to San Francisco.
Okay.
So it's been that. So, yeah.
I'll circle back before we go.
That's fine.
No. You want me right here? Right here.
There's more space if y'all want to swing around. There's a bunch of room over here. If you want to come over here. For media, do you guys have a good enough shot or everybody's good? You good for your shots?
for miking. Are you guys good? 'Cause we're gonna, okay.
Yeah. Because of the street.
We'd like to thank you all for coming out for the ribbon cutting ceremony. First, you'll hear from Andre Scott, who was one of the partners, Chef Darnell, Brian Anderson from the city of Cleveland.
Good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for coming to this ribbon cutting ceremony for the Winter House Restaurant. It's been a great journey. My name is Andre Scott, one of the partners here at Jeremiah Burks and Ryan Gillette, also known as DJ Ryan Wilson, Cleveland Browns official DJ. This has been a great journey. The last year and a half has been very, very crazy and things with the pandemic, and we're just grateful to be able to bring something to the community of Cleveland Heights, something new, something creative, something fun, also bring jobs. We want to thank Chef Darnell. He believed in us. He believed in the vision when Ryan reached out to him. He's been nothing but amazing to us. We want to thank our interior designer over there, Jerry. And this is just going to be a journey for us. We really be good for the city of Cleveland Heights, and we want to thank our families, our wives, especially our wives. They have been the backbone to us all. So thank you for everything.
Yes, thank you all for welcoming me to Cleveland. I appreciate it. As y'all know, I'm an implant here, so I'm just happy to bring some our urban eclectic cuisine to the city and bring that excitement that these fellas bring with us. So let's get ready. We're excited. We're thankful to be here, and thank you all for coming out.
My name is Brian Anderson from the Economic Development Department for the City of Cleveland Heights. On behalf of the city and as well as Councilwoman Melody Hart here, who's here today, I want to congratulate your entire team on making this happen. You guys really took the dream and made it happen during a really rough time. So it's great to have a really unique, great concept here of Cedar and Taylor, taking a really prominent gateway location here in the city. We wish you guys nothing but the best, nothing but the best luck moving forward. It's been, I don't remember how long ago it was that, Andre, you first called me, and it seems even longer than that, but, hopefully we were able to give you guys some guidance, but you guys are really a force of nature making this happen. So, certainly, congratulations, and we're very excited to have you here.
If anybody wants to get a group photo, you guys can get together so we can get a group photo before we cut the ribbon.